Well, while some politicians argue that schemes like ulez will cost them dearly in elections, campaigners say there's a cost to inaction as well. Rosamund Adoo-Kissi-Debrah lost her daughter Ella just after her 9th birthday to an asthma attack, which was brought on by pollution. And Ella was the first person in the world to have air pollution listed as a cause of death on the death certificate. And I'm pleased to say that Rosamund joins me now in the studio. The thing is, Rosamund, and thank you very much for coming in, given your experience, it must be very tough to see what's going on now, this sort of backlash that's going on.
Not really, because I think when, we are in a cost of living crisis, and it's going to hit people in the pockets, but I can't believe I'm going to use the word blame, but I'm going to have to, because so some of the things that go on behind the scenes that people aren't aware of, I've been lobbying the government for a public health campaign, which would have been headed by, hopefully, Sir Chris Whitty, because he brought out a report last year on air pollution and health. And the coroner was very clear that there is a low level of public awareness when it comes to the impact of air pollution on health. And I need to remind everyone that the British public put their hands in their pockets and paid to get Ella's inquest quashed. And they wanted answers. And that's what I have continued to do. So although in December 2020, I got air pollution on the death certificate, I decided to still continue and get more answers. And that is where we were. And a couple of things I've got to say is also at the inquest, the government has some responsibility. The Department of Environment, so does the Department of Health, and so does the Department of Transport, and obviously the Mayor of London's office, and councils do. And the advice was they should all work together to solve this problem. And the blame game, I think it is absolutely appalling. A 250,000 children in London have asthma. Up to 12 die every year just in London. And today, I haven't heard anybody talk about children or the most vulnerable. And it's all been about how we can manipulate to win the next election.
Well, when you see what happened in Uxbridge, you see, is there a part of you can understand what they're saying and why they're worried, at the same time as accepting that perhaps it's politics which gets in the way here?
Yes, politics, but this isn't an actual environment issue. This is a public health issue. This is my issue with the whole... I'm not sure who is dictating this narrative. Air pollution is the biggest environmental disaster of our time. Between 7 and 9 million people die every year worldwide. It is a pandemic. It is everywhere. And for the British people, some of the figures which people haven't understood, and for me to explain, it literally affects every organ in the body. So pregnant women, they've found black carbon in the placenta, and dementia patients now, they've found black carbon on their brains. And I am going to take some responsibility of this, believe it or not. From the point of view was, my background is teaching, and part of me feels that I haven't made the case strong enough. And people would be, what are you saying? But that is what I used to do. I used to teach, and I feel that we haven't explained the reason why some of these actions need to happen. And I would take part of the blame for that. People will say, oh, you're being very hard on yourself. But I am always thinking, how can I better explain what is going on? Why are children still dying in 2023? And I've got to go back to say, asthma is the #1 childhood illness in this country. 1.1 million children in this country have it. And it's the most common reason why children miss school in this country. And you can say, I am far from happy for today. I am glad Mayor Khan is going to stick to it. And I have been lobbying that he needs to look again. And he has. I think he extended it now to everyone who's on child benefits. I also lobbied for buses in outer London, and he brought in the Superloop. I have seen some of the comments that it needs to be improved, and I will continue to talk to him. Look, the health outcomes in outer London are not great. And I wouldn't want anybody to go through what I've been through, Penny. That is why I continue. We need to go on this journey, and we need to persuade the public to come along, and I'm just part of that.
And that is the point, isn't it? Rosamund, thank you very much. I'm going to bring in Monday night's first edition panel for their reaction with me tonight, Politico's UK editor Jack Blanchard and The Sun's chief political correspondent Natasha Clark. The thing is that this has become more than a conversation. I think, I think I'm safe in saying that there was a time, wasn't there, when people did seem to be kind of, pulling together across the political parties and saying we need to do something about this. And now they're rowing back. And can you put it at Uxbridge's door?
I mean, to a degree you can, and it's quite depressing to see. I mean, in other countries you've seen it more with different parties taking very different positions on this stuff, and there has been more of a consensus in this country up until last Thursday. And I mean, it's amazing if you think that by-election was only won by a few hundred votes. It could so easily have gone the other way. It was very, very close indeed, and yet we suddenly see this sea change in the language politicians are using about policies. You've got to remember, ULEZ was something that Boris Johnson, as a Conservative mayor, initially came up with and was then supported by Labour and expanded.
Have we explained it is the Ultra Low Emission Zone? I don't know whether I keep on forgetting that we perhaps ought to remind people what it is. And this is, and the reason why some people get a bit concerned about it is because what it says is essentially you can carry on using your polluting vehicles as long as you pay for it, which I'm sure is not what you actually wanted. But can I come to you on this one?
Yeah, so ULEZ is obviously if you've got a very old polluting vehicle, and actually what I think the Conservatives haven't been very good at, and actually to be fair, Labour haven't been very good at, is basically saying that it actually doesn't affect that many cars. It only affects very old ones. I think it's about 1 in 10 cars that are going to be affected by this. They haven't made the case as to why. And I think Sadiq Khan obviously has been sort of pushing this, and he's got a book talking about his struggles with asthma as well, and why it's so important to him to make a stand. But obviously now he's facing a bit of a backlash from the National Labour Party, because Keir Starmer is looking at him and going, have you just lost me a seat in Parliament? And it sounds like the two have been having a few talks behind the scenes about whether there is any other things that can be done, because obviously the Mayor of London has got to meet these targets. They are legally binding. He has to do something about it. But are there any other, measures that can be done? Keir Starmer has talked about putting more money into that scrappage scheme to try and help ease the financial transition. I think that might be something that we might see from the Mayor of London at some point.
Because that's the point, isn't it? Is because although what Natasha's saying is that it doesn't affect a huge amount of vehicles, it is the vast majority of those vehicles are probably going to be owned by people who haven't got any wiggle room financially. And that is where it comes down to people saying, yes, I think it's a really good idea, but not if I have to pay for it.
Well, the scrappage scheme does need to be extended. I think people need to ask particular questions. Why has the government given cities outside of London money for the scrappage scheme? And why won't they give Sadiq Khan some money to help people out? I'm not going to say anything. I think people just need to ask themselves these questions. And I will go back again to what the coroner said. Unless they do something about the air we breathe, children will continue to die like my daughter. And since Ella died, over 60 children have died in London in 10 years. And we need to think about those families right now.
See, the other problem with air pollution is that you can't see it.
Very true.
And the only time you ever see air pollution is, I mean, anybody who thinks about a polluted city and pictures, for example, I don't know if you remember when, I think it was last year, when pictures of Shanghai, or Beijing, where you couldn't see a building that was literally feet away from you. That's when you see pollution, and that's when you go, ah, that's pollution. Thing is, most of our cities, we don't have that anymore, do we?
We don't. And I struggled when I was first told about my daughter's condition, when the pathologist said her lungs looked like that of a smoker. Yeah. And I remember just looking at her consultant, puzzled, thinking, how can it be? Yeah. It's because the particles are so tiny, you have to look at them underneath a microscope. Yeah. But it is really, we pay about 20 billion in the National Health Service due to air pollution. And some are living longer, but they are living with awful illnesses.
Yeah. And you do wonder as well where the campaigners are in this as well, Jack. I mean, I'm just wondering if maybe mothers should band together and do a bit more campaigning, because they're the ones who kind of see it at first hand.
I mean, it's pretty clear that the Conservative campaign in Uxbridge was very successful in trying to put the fear of God into people about this. As we've just heard, actually only 1 in 10 vehicles was affected by it, but you wouldn't know it from the way that people were sort of drummed up against it in that part of the world. And we've seen this from the Conservative government before. If you remember back, 2012, David Cameron was elected, that former Conservative Prime Minister, on big green drive, and as soon as we had a cost of living crisis, as we called it then as well, he announced he was going to cut the green crap, as he called it. It's a knee-jerk reaction by politicians who have strayed out of their comfort zone. As soon as they come under pressure like that, this is what they go for, and we seem to be seeing it again from Rishi Sunak today.
Well, we're going to leave that conversation there. Thank you very much, Rosamund Adoo-Kissi-Debrah, and also Jack and Natasha, who's staying with us.